as we head into the later portions of January and get closer and closer to the month of February. This election season gets underway early in the state of Michigan. The first primary is coming up in late February and others throughout the years. We head toward a busy November presidential election season. There's plenty of more rights that you have and different ways that you can vote in the state of Michigan per elections in the past several years. So it's important to get the information you need to know about how you can vote, when you can vote, where you can vote, and those rights that are provided to you. The National Council of Jewish Women of Michigan is holding a seminar later on this week virtually via Zoom on Thursday, January 11th at 7 o'clock p.m. called The Power of Your Vote, Taking Advantage of New Voting Rights. Joining us to talk about that virtual seminar is one of its three panelists, West Bloomfield Township Clerk Debbie Binder. Debbie, thank you for being with us.
Good morning, Tyler, and I know you're a state guy, but happy National Champions Day.
Hey, you know what? It's tough to be mad about that state championship with all of our West Bloomfield connections to that game, wide receivers coach Ron Bellamy, Donovan Edwards, and so on. So all having big games yesterday had a big impact. So we're proud in our local community, and congratulations to them. But let's get into this special event. Football always special, but the elections are really special too. And this year, it's again going to be ramped up in the high gear. We always know that there's more enthusiasm about the elections when we get into a presidential year, and all the more important than it is that people know their rights and how they can vote, and that's changed a lot in past years.
Yes, there have been some significant changes beginning with Proposal 3 of 2018 and continuing into Proposal 2 of 2022. And this will be the first big election cycle where we see some of the effect, impact of those changes. So people are a little bit confused, and we're doing our best to make sure they're straightened out. And we're grateful to the National Council of Jewish Women for understanding the importance of getting that message out and making sure, Tyler, I think one of the most important things is that message gets out through clerks and the Secretary of State and county clerks and people that really know, instead of people who are self-proclaimed experts who may or may not have the correct information.
Yeah, and especially with all these new rights that are available, and they're still relatively fresh. They've been in process, or some of them have been in process for past elections. But as we know, a lot of people, maybe they set out those midterm elections or smaller special elections in their local community, and they don't really get involved again until that next 4 years comes around and they get back to a presidential election, or they get to that 2-year midterm for the gubernatorial elections in their state. And so that's where that confusion comes in. And especially after the skepticism and the controversy that followed the last presidential election, how much more important is it from your perspective as a clerk and your colleagues and Lisa Brown, the Oakland County Clerk, and Secretary of State Jocelyn Benson, and your departments to make sure that whether it's locally in West Bloomfield, whether it's regionally in Oakland County or statewide, that people understand these processes and why they are the way that they are now?
Well, voter education has never been more important and increasingly important. I mean, I think it was always an important message, but as things change and people do need to understand certain changes in process, and that every community, every jurisdiction follows state and federal election law, but there are changes to the way that election law is. And one of the biggest things that we're seeing this election cycle that will be the first time it's implemented is early voting, where the voter will have rights, a 9-day period prior to the election where they can vote early. It's called early. The difference between early voting and absentee voting is in early voting, the voter will actually put their own ballot in through the tabulator. Whereas in absentee voting, we count those ballots on election day. The plus to early voting is that if you do make a mistake, for an example, in a regular primary, not a presidential primary, if you were to cross over parties where that would spoil your ballot, the machine's going to spit it back out to you, let you know you made a mistake that you can then correct. Where if you vote absentee, you don't have an opportunity to correct that mistake. So that's a plus to early voting, and you will be able to vote early 9 days ahead of an election in the at the West Bloomfield Main Library. The 9 days begin on the Saturday, or the Saturday, 2 Saturdays before the election. So it continues Saturday, Sunday, that weekend, then Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. There is no early voting on Monday, although you can get an absentee ballot until 4 p.m. sharp on Monday. One big change that this will create is the opportunity to spoil a ballot if you've already turned it in. So in the last presidential primary, as candidates dropped out, people would come into our office to spoil a ballot and get a new one. Well, the deadline will be moving to the Friday before. So Friday, about 10 days before the election, if you've turned in your ballot, you will no longer be able to spoil that ballot, which that change came because now we have pre-processing and we have early voting. And anybody who has already cast their ballot in the tabulator would not be able to change their vote. So now there's consistency there. So that's one of the big changes. Another change is the implementation of the permanent ballot. People have always been able to be on the permanent absentee ballot application list, but now they will be able to request that a ballot gets mailed to their house permanently, and they're on that. They fill out one application. One important thing, and I think what's made it a little more confusing, is that we're beginning in a presidential primary, that people forget that there actually are two distinct ballots or three distinct ballots that they have to select from. So even if they request to be on that permanent ballot list and we automatically send them a ballot, they will get a ballot selection card from us every 4 years so that they can let us know what kind of ballot to send for that election. So that's one of the changes I think that has people, confused right now. But on that application that they're getting for the presidential primary, which is February 27th, there is a checkbox to select to receive a permanent ballot to your registered address. So those are probably two of the most significant changes, but we also have an increase in drop boxes in accordance with state law. So in addition to the two drop boxes we have at Town Hall on the east and west side of Town Hall, there will be a drop box outside of West Bloomfield Connect, and there will also be one at ACS, the West Bloomfield School District Administrative and Community Service Building, in the parking lot. So we are very grateful to our community partners that have allowed us to place those drop boxes in their locations. But it is important for our voters to remember you have to return your ballot or your application to a drop box that is for your jurisdiction. So if you work in Southfield and you live in West Bloomfield or vice versa, you want to make sure you put it in the correct drop box, not the other municipalities.
You can learn more information on West Bloomfield election information and regulations by visiting wbtownship.org. And of course, another great way to learn more about these new options for voting, what they mean, how these processes work to make all these new voting options possible in Michigan and still have free and fair elections by joining the National Council of Jewish Women alongside speakers Debbie Binder, a West Bloomfield Township Clerk, with us on The Splash today, as well as Oakland County Clerk Lisa Brown and Michigan Secretary of State Jocelyn Benson. The power of your vote, taking advantage of new voting rights, is 7 p.m. on Thursday, January 11th via Zoom. And Clerk Binder, as we talk about these new regulations that are in place, these new options that are in place, how has the processes changed then for our local clerks and for the county-wide also, and even really across the state, with these new options in place to continue to have free and fair, especially those fair elections? Because the fact of the matter is people can vote early, people can vote absentee. There is a lot of confusion around that, and part of that, I think, is because people just don't know a little bit of the insight on how the processes from a clerk's standpoint, from a clerk's office standpoint, have changed as well.
The best way to understand that, and we always tell people, is to work an election. It's very enlightening to see the checks and balances in place and see the process take place. So if anyone wants to really understand the intricacies of administering an election, it's a great way to get involved. Now, in Michigan, we are one of only 8 states where the elections are administered at the local level. Typically, they're administered in at the county level. We do work in conjunction with the county, and over the past few years, West Bloomfield has increased our participation with the county in terms of processing our absentee ballots for any that are received before 4 p.m. the day before the election. And now the county, and we are actually one of very few, if not the only county in the state, where Lisa Brown has coordinated early voting centers to help the local clerks to help defray some of the costs and the administration, because every community has to provide for 9 days of early voting and to have the hours maintained. And you would have to staff those locations as well as buy the equipment. And by creating these early voting centers and partnering with Oakland County, which the law has allowed us to do, Lisa has really helped out our communities, our local communities, and we have a pretty significant participation rate in Oakland County because it is a tremendous asset. So they do have one regional county center as well at Waterford Oaks for people in West Bloomfield. Any voter at the main library, if they're in Orchard Lake, Kego Harbor, Sylvan Lake, or West Bloomfield, they would vote at our regional center. But also any person in Oakland County can vote out at Waterford Oaks. So good things to keep in mind. But again, that important distinction, Tyler, between early voting and absentee voting is that early ballot is put through the tabulator by the voter themselves, where an absentee ballot is turned into the clerk's office, balanced and up to the day that it's sent to the for processing. And we have to balance to that list of what is sent over, but those are counted on election day. That's probably your biggest difference between early and absentee. But yes, our voters now have the option to vote by early voting, absentee voting, or they may also vote in their polling location on election day. So we don't want to forget that that's always an option too.
On your screen is the flyer for this event happening Thursday, January 11th, virtually via Zoom. The power of your vote, taking advantage of new voting rights, featuring Secretary of State Jocelyn, Benson, Oakland County Clerk Lisa Brown, and of course West Bloomfield Township Clerk Debbie Binder. Great opportunity to get even more insight in these new processes, how they work at the local, county, and the statewide level to ensure the fairness of our elections, with the ease of elections and voting for voters all across the state of Michigan, and to get your questions answered. Plenty of more information. On your screen, we have the flyer for that. There's a QR code at the bottom right that you can scan to register to attend this event and get the Zoom link, or you can call the office of the National Council of Jewish Women of Michigan at 248-355-3300, which is also listed on this flyer. Debbie, anything else that we should know as we get ready for this conference virtually on Thursday night, and what else people may be able to experience and learn from attending?
I think as you mentioned, and we talked about that voter education is important, and you gave some great sources of information. And I would also add that at the Secretary of State's website, which is michigan.gov/vote, it's a great source of information as well as a place to register, to request your permanent ballot, to check, to ensure that you're registered and to see which districts you're in, and as well as to access a sample ballot, which you can also get from the clerk's office. But it's important to make sure you're getting your information from a correct source. And, we're always available. If anyone wants to call me, whether you're in my jurisdiction or not, I'm happy to provide you with the answers. And I would say, contact one of us. But I do think that our program Thursday night will be extremely informative to give people an overview of elections in Michigan, how they've changed, why they're safe and secure, and how hard we're working as a group to make sure that everybody has a chance to have their voice heard. And it's important to remember, these are rights that were protected in the Constitution and voted on by the people. So important things to remember.
Yeah, a lot of these options were stopgaps for safety concerns and to make sure that people could get out and vote in 2020, and later were put into Michigan state law by Proposal 2 of 2022. And that's all the more reason to learn more about these, because this is the way of the present and the future in the state of Michigan as you get out to vote, both in a primary election, a presidential election, and all other elections in between. Debbie, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much, Tyler. You have a great day.